In my mother's country, when a child is born, the severed umbilical cord is buried with the seed. And the tree that grows belongs to that child, and in that child's life is mirrored the life of that tree. Somewhere in Haiti stands a mango tree that is my brother's. Brown, beautiful, and braided, he was planted back in the summer of 1972. Back when my parents were new immigrants. Back before they started dreaming in English. Back when their heartbeat still danced to the rhythm of their accents. By the time I was born, it seems that they thought it was no longer necessary to tie their children to the land where they came from. So instead of planting me a coconut tree, they gave me a passport. And for most of my memorable summers, I spent in Haiti, traveling across the language and the culture that has shaped me. When we speak about culture, oftentimes we use the vocabulary of preservation and nostalgia. Culture does preserve, but it also transforms and it expands. Within one generation, my parents transformed a tradition and quite possibly changed the trajectory of a cultural practice, and at least in our family. What I would like for you guys to do, I'd like to invite you to take out something to write on and something to write with. If anything that is said during this talk triggers inspiration or even self-reflection, please feel free to write it down. And later, we will talk about it. So, what does it mean to dance on a hyphen and live in a slash? And as simply and as holistically as I can put it, it means to be able to access, embrace, and purposefully integrate for the fullness of your creativity by exploring culture. And when I say culture in this context, I am not limiting it to ethnicity. Although when you dance on a hyphen and live in a slash, you will look at your heritage, but you will also look at the stories that frame what you do and ultimately who you are. So how do you do that? You do that through questioning. It has been said that your world expands or contracts based on the questions that you ask. I want to take that a step further and propose that it's not necessarily just the questions that expand or contract your world, but what you do with the answers that you get. We are afraid of asking questions, but we are terrified of the answers, more so. And rightfully so, because the answers will require that you do one of three things. Either face reality, take action, or take responsibility. And sometimes, depending on the situation, you might have to take all three, right? But your world will not expand and you will not grow until you first begin to ask the questions. So, in my experience and in my work, I've found that there's a way of questioning, there are 4 ways of questioning that can help you move across these hyphens, dance across these hyphens, and live in these slashes. The first is to identify. And when you identify, you ask where are your hyphens and what are your slashes. Now, your hyphens in this context, your hyphens will be dealing with your culture, your ethnicity, your heritage. Your slashes, however, they're more so your roles, the roles that you embody. The next question you ask yourself under identification is, do you see your hyphens as borders or do you see them as bridges? So if they're borders, they are separate. But if they're bridges, you use them, you can travel across them. Okay? And when you look at your slashes, are they brick walls or are they veiled archways? And again, it's about the ease of mobility. If they're brick walls, you're not going through them, right? They're roles that you feel are stagnant. But if they're veiled archways, you can move through them fluidly. Next is the question to understand. Once you have identified what are your hyphens and where are your slashes, now you need to ask yourself, What does it mean to be that? And what does it mean to be those? What are the stories and the myths that come along with being this identity, filling this role? And are they honest? And when I say honest, I don't mean true. Truth is easy. Honesty is hard, right? Truth is the facts. Honesty is the facts with understanding, the facts with purpose. Truth will lead you to a conclusion. Honesty will lead you to compassion. Okay. Next, you question to leverage. And when you're questioning to leverage, now that you have your identity, you understand what these stories mean to you, how do they serve you? And how can you use them to serve others? And how do they connect you to others? And last, you question to transform. How do I use this identity, this understanding and awareness to expand more fully into who I am and what I do? To expand my creativity, to expand the world in which I live. So, what does this look like? For me, my hyphen, I am Haitian American. My slashes, I'm an educator, I'm a performer, I am a writer, I am a woman. And when I look at these with my hyphen, I do view it as a bridge. It hasn't always been that way, but it is a bridge for me. And when I look at my slashes, it has not always been this way, but they are veiled archways. I move through them fluidly. However, this could always change. Next, when I look at the story, what does it mean? What does it mean to be Haitian American? Now, it means a whole bunch of things. Growing up, it always meant that I had a lot of explaining to do. And it wasn't necessarily I had to explain why I was Haitian American. That's geography, that's revolution, that's embargo, that's travel. But I had to explain what did it mean to my friends. I had to explain to my parents what exactly did it mean to be American, right? What it also meant was that I became well-versed in the language of metaphor, simile, and analogy. Haitian Creole is a language of proverbs. There's not that much direct speak in Haitian Creole. So most of the conversations you will hear are laden with historical references. If you want to know about the tree, they will tell you about the roots and the seeds. Okay? Oftentimes, growing up with my grandmother and my parents, it was always, we're tired of talking to you. It's like washing our hands and drying it on the floor. Although I didn't understand what I meant, I knew that's not necessarily something you want to consistently do. Okay, often being told, if you can't listen, you will feel. And my favorite, I'm going to say it and I'm just going to leave it here. My grandmother yelling at the grandkids, basically saying, you don't hear, stand up. Maybe you can hear me. I wonder what we hear with if we have to stand to hear. When I look at my hyphens, what does it mean to be a woman? And I have to say, I am the only girl in my family. When I say my family, I mean my brother and I and our 8 cousins. Out of the 10 of us, I was the only girl. And whenever I tell this story, whenever I share this, people go, oh, that must mean you were a princess. Not really. That must mean that you were very sheltered. No, not so much. That must mean that you couldn't do a lot of things. Not really. Although there were a few things that I couldn't do, there were many things that I was allowed to do. Most of my story, most of the narratives that I have about womanhood were positive. I remember growing up, my father actually bought an Atari, dating myself. I don't know if anybody remembers the Atari 5200. And all of my cousins were in the playroom playing with it. And I wanted to turn, and they were playing pole position, which was like, a racing game. And I was standing waiting for my turn, and they were like, oh, you can't play. And I was like, why? They were like, oh, it's a racing game, and you're a girl. And I was like, but why? They were like, oh, it's not your place. So I went to the kitchen where my grandmother was, and I just sat there, just pounding on the table, and she was like, oh, what's the matter? And I was like, They said I can't play. She's like, why? They only have one of the bagay? Bagay is thing. Right? They only have one of the bagay, that's why you can't play? No. Well, why you can't play? Because they said it's not my place. She stopped what she was doing, and she looked at me and she said, your place is wherever you stand. And that is something that I've always carried with me. As a woman, my place is wherever I stand. And that is a double-edged sword. But it is a double-edged sword. Because my place is wherever I stand, I need to choose where I stand wisely. Because my place is wherever I stand, I need to make sure that I stand firmly. Because my place is wherever I stand, I need to make sure that I am ready to control this place that I stand in. So for me, being a woman has always come with positive narratives. I also remember my grandmother telling this story about her great-grandfather. And the story is not necessarily about him, it's about the land that she inherited. And my grandmother was born in 1919. When she speaks about her great-grandfather, I'm assuming this was the 1800s. And the only story that she shares about him is that he was killed. And the story that she shares is that there was a battle, and in the fighting, he was beheaded. And those who were present brought the head to his mother. And his mother stood there and said, you killed my son. There's nothing I can do. But I will tell you what, I will put him in the ground the way he came out of my womb, and that is whole. So people gathered and they created a wooden body for him. Now, I'm not entirely sure if this was a full wooden body or if it was just sticks. But what stuck with me was this woman stood her ground and basically said, what you took from me, I cannot get back, but you will give me back as much as possible. And I've always carried that with me. Next is once I have this understanding, how do I leverage it? Well, when I look at my culture, I leverage my culture into my writing. I leverage my culture into my teaching. How does it serve others? In 2010, I am sure that you guys all know about the major earthquake that happened in Haiti, yes? Okay. So many lives were lost, many people were displaced. Those who were displaced, a lot of them were children, a lot of them were young people, and they were able to be evacuated. And a lot of the populations that were evacuated to the US went to two major states, Florida being one, because it has a large Haitian population as well already, and New York being the other. At the time, I was teaching in New York City. And I remember most of the teachers being called in the meeting saying, listen, we are about to get an influx of new students. And many of them have experienced trauma. But more than anything, we have to be able to find a way to smoothly flow them through this new culture. And immediately, whenever there's trauma, you know that you need to help, but the fear comes, like, is my help going to be enough? You know, will I be able to give these children what they need? Will I be able to help them transition? So I was able to use my language, my Haitian Creole, in order to help these students at least access curricula. But I was also able to use my experience as living in this hyphen of being Haitian American to actually give them a safe space. Being able to understand that, yes, this is your home culture, and this is the culture that you have just been catapulted into. How do we translate it? How do you use this to transform? I believe that I am transforming my students. I am transforming my audience through the work and the words that I deliver. And all of that is because of my culture. All of that is because of the hyphens that I embody, as well as the slashes that I traveled through. So what I would ask is if you guys can take a few moments and figure out and share what that looks like for you.